Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk to you today about American prisoners of war in the Korean War, particularly African-American prisoners of war. And the reason I'm going to talk to you about them is because many of them chose to stay in the United States and not go to China. And the reason they chose to do that, and this is 1950s America, this is back when African Americans and Caucasians were heavily segregated. Now, the military became integrated in 1948, so the military was not completely segregated at the time, but civilian life in America was, and many of the African American soldiers chose to stay in the United States. And the main reason many of them chose was freedom of religion. And China did not have freedom of religion. In North Korea, you did not have freedom of religion. You had to renounce your God and become basically an atheist. And I read a book called Remembered Prisoners of a Forgotten War by Lewis H. Carlson. I cannot show you the book because it's programmed in my Kindle Cloud Reader. But if you Google Remembered Prisoners of a Forgotten War by Lewis H. Carlson, you can find it. Okay? Here we go. Okay. We're talking about Jerry Morgan, okay, African-American soldier. He served in World War II and Vietnam, also the Korean War. And he was a prisoner of war in Korea. And the book states, page 143, it says, for him, talking about for Jerry Morgan, for him, religion was much more important than anything the Chinese could offer. And here's what he said, okay? They talked against religion, talking about the Chinese. The Chinese soldiers talked against religion. They talked against religion. The camp commander made the comment, the Chinese prisoner of war commander, the camp commander made the comment, if you believe in God, why doesn't he come down here and save you? Many of the African-American soldiers just said under their breaths, don't worry, he'll be here. And the Chinese soldiers could not understand that. Okay? Also, in Operation Big Switch, that's when the U.S. soldiers, if they wanted to go, if they were prisoners of war in China or North Korea and they wanted to go back to the U.S., they could. If Chinese or North Korean prisoners of war wanted to go back to their countries and they were prisoners of war by the U.S. or South Korea, they could. Okay. Operation Big Switch. Talk about that. Okay. Jerry Morgan says this. We didn't lose a man in my squad from the day of capture to Operation Big Switch. Not a single person. There were 10 of us. At one time, one of our guys had given up, but we would not let him die. We made him get up and we made him walk. We boiled water and forced him to drink it. He didn't want to eat, but we just kept pushing food into him until he had to swallow. Eventually, he ended up regaining his strength and came home and stayed in the military. Also, there was this African-American prisoner of war named Robert Fletcher, and he befriended this Caucasian prisoner of war named Elliot Sortillo. Now, Robert Fletcher said in his prisoner of war camp, the African-American prisoners of war and the Caucasian prisoner of war suffered together. Nobody thought of each other as African-American or Caucasian. But Elliot Sortillo, he was young. He was 16 years old. Robert Fletcher was 17. Okay, Elliot Sortillo did not have a lot of responsibilities. So a lot of the other prisoners of war were jealous of him because a lot of them had wives and kids back home. And Elliot Sortillo did not. He was just young. He was from Philadelphia, Elliot Sortillo was. And Robert Fletcher would come up to Elliot Sortillo and say, hey, how are you doing? Just come talk to him about everyday things. Come check on Elliot Sortillo. And that meant a lot more than what I just said. Let me give you an example. Elliot Sortillo at that time was thinking about committing suicide because he thought nobody cared about him. But Robert Fletcher reached out to him. And Robert Fletcher and Elliot Sortillo are friends to this day. And Robert Sortillo and his wife, Elliot Sortillo and his wife credit Robert Fletcher for saving his life. Yes, that saved his life. He was about to kill himself until Elliot Sortillo was about to kill himself until Robert Fletcher came and reached out to him. I had a tongue twister there, but I caught myself. I caught it. Okay? Can't hold it against me because I caught it. All right. Here we go. It also says here, at page 145, many prisoners credit their spiritual beliefs for their survival. Even those who practiced no formal religion, faith and hope were all important. Some men discovered religion only after being captured. But Richard Bassett brought his God with him into the military. Richard Bassett was a prisoner of war. The book does not say if he was Caucasian or African-American, but Richard Bassett said, when I was captured, I had the New Testament in my fatigue pocket. It had been my daily habit to read it, and now I found myself reading more and more each day. I was also spending much of my time meditating on what I had just read. Okay, a lot of times the prisoners of war had to secretly worship. The Chinese and North Koreans would not let them worship God. It was against the laws in their country and the laws in their military to worship God. No freedom of religion. The U.S. offered freedom of religion, which is why I believe even in 1950s America that a lot of the African-American soldiers made the correct decision to go back to America. If they were captured by the Chinese, many African-American soldiers chose to go back to the United States. Not all of them. Only 3 chose to remain in China. Took a lot of guts. But they wanted to keep their God. They wanted to keep their religious beliefs and be able to practice it freely. Because America did allow that for African Americans at the time. Around the 1950s, better than the 1920s and 1930s. But they didn't have much to come back to. But they definitely did have freedom of religion to come back to. Particularly if they got out of the military, they didn't have much to come back to. If they stayed in the military, opportunities were steady opening up. So, anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless, and bye-bye. Bye-bye.